Welcome to the Bleep Bulimia podcast with guest Matt O'Neill with a mission to spread positivity. Hi, everyone. I am Lorianne. I am the host of Bleep Bulimia. And today I'm so pleased to have Matt O'Neill, who is a renowned podcast host, entrepreneur, Forbes books author, and he's here to share his mission for spreading positivity. Welcome, Matt. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh my gosh, Lorianne, I couldn't be more happy to be here with you today. Thank you. It's such an honor.
So this is interesting. You're spreading positivity. I just wanted to find out what brought you to this point.
Lots and lots of negativity. So, feeling awful, like dealing with all of the bad mood emotions. You and I have already kind of talked before we jumped on about the feeling of shame that we're not good enough as we are. That was a massive driving force in my whole life, is this feeling I wasn't good enough ever since I was a kid. And it was really generational. And everyone in my direct family line is dealing with it or has dealt with it. But then other emotions too, like this feeling of guilt, like I was always doing things that were wrong and that I deserved to be punished for it. And then because of that, because I thought that I wasn't good enough and that I needed to do better, I constantly told everyone around me that they weren't doing enough and they needed to do better. And then that would create a bunch of like enemies around me. And then, feeling sad about all the stuff that was happening in my life because of these behaviors, and feeling fearful and anxious about when the other shoe would drop. Even if things were going good, I'd get really afraid that they would go bad eventually, because they always did, right? And then I'd get super angry. Like anger was probably what on the outward world that people could see. It was that I was angry, because I would have a very short fuse and I would blow up, right? And then ultimately, the final bad mood that I was really trapped in was a feeling of pride, like this thought that I was superior to others, and I would put on this air that I was better than other people. And it was just covering up all of the insecurities that I just described, because I really didn't feel as good as everybody else. And so I had to like pretend like I was, but I didn't know any of this stuff. And I just knew I didn't feel happy. I was interviewed for my high school yearbook, and I had a perfectionism thing. Perfectionism is another one of those indicators that you don't feel good enough as you are, that you have to perform perfectly to try to prove your worth. Well, I was an all A student, and that was part of my perfectionism, was that I had to get A's to prove I was good. And they interviewed me as one of the most successful, like that interview thing in the yearbook where they say most likely to succeed. And I remember my buddy Avi was doing the interview, and he said, "Matt, what are you going to be when you grow up?" And I said, "Avi, honestly, I just want to be happy." And that was probably one of the first admissions of like honesty that I had in my life to that point, was that I wasn't happy, and that was what I wanted. So that was when I was 18 years old. And now I'm 43, and I'm still studying it and working at it, but it has been decades long of a journey to like find the source of what makes us happy, and then how to maintain it as long as I can for longer and longer periods of time.
Wow. And in your bio, I read that you studied with several very people that people would know. I was smiling when I saw Dr. Jane Goodall, because I in university studied her. It's true. I think it was an anthropology course or something anyway. And I thought, wow, that's really neat. So can you tell us a little bit more about that journey?
Yes, everything changed for me when I was 25. And I call it grace. The older and older that I get, the more and more spiritual that I get. And I think that grace has always been there. I just didn't recognize it. I kind of thought I was doing everything on my own, in spite of all the challenges. I thought, I'm like, well, if it's just up to me and nobody's here for me, I'll just like do everything on my own. But it was never true. And when I was 25, I had a big moment of grace. It was my cousin. She gave me the movie The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. And in The Secret, the movie said, everything in your life, all the friends you have, the money in your bank account, the job that you have, the significant other you have or don't have, all of it is being attracted to you by your emotions and your thoughts. And it was like a massive awakening. I was like, wait a minute. I'm doing all of this? Like all these problems, all the people I don't like, everything that's going wrong, I'm the cause of that? Like that's how is that even true? But it started to like blossom in me, um, a desire to keep learning more about that. And I just dove headfirst into self-development and self-improvement. And I began reading voraciously. And then I began traveling all over the world to meet these incredible masters of mindset and motivation and happiness. One of them I got to meet was Dr. Jane Goodall, and she is such a treasure. She's such an
Wow.
inspiration. She's an inspiration to me in such a big way because this is a woman that also just had some grace in her life, but she used her entire life to make the biggest impact on humanity and the plant world and the animal world that she possibly could. She's still traveling. She's 89 years old, and
Oh
she
my God.
spends every single day in a hotel giving lectures to try to save the planet. And
Wow.
like I admire somebody that cares that passionately about making a difference.
Absolutely. Wow. That's an honor. Seriously. Yeah. Um, so I'm going to sort of go backwards a little bit. Interestingly enough, okay, so this is about bulimia, and I remember um, while I was bulimic, that was one thing that I tended to have too, was I would become not so much out, believe it or not, not so much out in the public, but I would snap and my moods were not steady. It's been a turnaround since I let go of the bulimia. Um, Took me some time because I had to deal with the emotional side of things and not being able to go to food to try and hold down all those feelings. But still, when I didn't have the food, there would be those moments. I find that interesting. So your moods, how did you work with that? That I'm really curious about.
Yeah, so for me, it was drugs and alcohol. And I would go to drugs and alcohol to regulate my emotions. And look, all we're doing, in it doesn't matter what our vice is, it's a noble calling. We know we don't feel good inside, and so we're just trying to feel good. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, of course, I chose a destructive route, but it comes from a higher place of wanting to get beyond the negative thoughts and feel better. And so if we're not taught like really healthy ways to get beyond the negative thoughts and feel better, then we're just going to do what works. And so if eating a lot of food can definitely change the way we feel. It changes us chemically. It immediately we feel satiated. I'm sure you can tell me a whole lot more about how that process helps you regulate your emotions than I can. But for me, going to drugs, I knew exactly what it was going to do. It was going to shut my mind off.
Mhm.
I wasn't going to have all those negative thoughts anymore. I was going to get to be free of them. And that was going to feel really good until it didn't. And so then there's the inevitable come down. And then the next day I'd be like, well, let's just do the drugs again. That would be great. And I'll just drink the alcohol as we do the drugs. And then maybe I can just black completely out and shut the whole thing off. And that'd be awesome. And so I would just did that for a long, long, long time until I was like, finally, I'm like, this isn't a long-term solution. This isn't going to help me be happy forever. And that's where the wake up of having the secret started to show me that there are healthier methods to achieving this than what I was after. So how did I, so, when we're trying to regulate our emotions with substances, or outside, because all of our emotions come from within.
Mhm.
Like the anger is coming from within, the happiness is coming from within, the feelings of unworthiness is coming from within. But when we're trying to suppress all of that stuff, we're basically saying, I don't want to experience it. So I'm just going to not experience it. I'll do this external thing that'll distract me from experiencing it. Well, what happens is those emotions bottle up and then they explode because we never dealt with them. We just shoved them down. And that's why you can be really volatile and have a short fuse.
That makes sense. Yeah. Just the volcano, like they say, it's just it blows up.
And
Yeah.
you know, I defined myself as it. I said, I just have a short fuse. You know, I have a short temper. It's just who I am. Deal with it. Right. Like I did, and that's a victim stance too, of saying I was born this way. My dad was this way. I inherited it from him. It's who I am. Well, now on the other side of it, you wouldn't say I have a short fuse. And I'm sure, Lorianne, people wouldn't say at this point in your journey that you have a short fuse. Of course, we can both get angry. I'm not saying that
Yes.
anger isn't part of it, but it's not the way that it was.
No. And it's actually interesting too, because I'll wake up some days and just the smallest thing bothers me, and but I'm acutely aware of that. So I'm going, okay, like what's going on here? Like there's something, because the little things mean that there's something else. And so I try to be very um aware of it. And if I can't figure it out, when I get to work, I go, if I'm not myself today, I said, it's not you, it's me. Like, because I haven't figured out what I'm going through right now, right? It could be, I'm thinking about gosh knows what, I don't know.
Oh, it's beautiful. That's a beautiful like self-acceptance too. And think about how far of a journey you've come from not accepting yourself and not feeling worthy of yourself to now being so accepting yourself that you accept that some days you're not in your best mind. And you can just say, hey, what it's not you. There's nothing going on with you. There's something going on in my mind. So don't take it personally. But that's also just self-love of understanding that we're not always going to be on our A game every day.
Yeah, and I think that that also helps people. So we were talking about and this is something we want to discuss, the negative people. I was saying that, I was president of an organization, and of course it's all volunteer, and we have 10 volunteer board members, and you can have 9 of them that are just absolutely fantastic, and one of them that's so negative, and that negativity spreads, and the meeting just does not go well, all because of one negative person. So you said that there's ways of getting around that, because
Yes.
I still sometimes find I'm much better with it now, but you can feel that in a room. You can have, like, 50 wonderful people, 2 negative people, and somehow that
Yeah.
aura comes towards.
Yeah. Yeah. So we were just at the beach and with my family, we're super joyful. It's Father's Day. I'm surfing, I'm pushing my girls on surfboards and then we went over and we were playing a game. We were throwing a ball back and forth. And this woman comes like cussing up and down, walks right through my family, right, and looks at us, at my little children, they're 2, 6, 8, and 10, and is cussing like crazy, so much anger, so much just negativity. And she said, yeah, somebody took all my effing stuff and I'm going to go through your stuff. And like, she just comes through and now, of course, if there's a lot of negativity within me, I could engage with her. Like, how dare you? How dare you in front of my kids? This isn't a place for that, right? I could have totally engaged her. Well, there's not a bunch of negativity at this point in me. And so the best way is kind of be like a matador, and I just let her go. I just she just zoomed on down the beach and kept cussing at other people, right? And then like 50 yards later, I see her and someone else, and they didn't just let her go. And her negativity riled up their negativity. And then they were like, how dare you? And you can't talk like that. And you probably just misplaced it and blah, blah, blah. And then the police show up. And it's this huge scene of drama that I had completely avoided because I just didn't engage in the negativity. And this is what like negativity really wants. It's like it's got its own life force.
Hmm.
and it feeds off of us. And so somebody that is being that this negativity is taken a hold of, it can take over us. Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body. And the pain body will show up, it takes over, it has its own desires, it has its own worldview, it sees the world and it with different eyes. It's like putting on a pair of rose glasses or a pair of blue glasses, and all of a sudden everything around you looks different. You don't realize it, but when that pain body takes you over, the whole world all of a sudden looks different and your goals are different. What negativity's goal is to make other people feel bad too. And it is trying to latch on to anyone and pull it down with it. And so the best thing you can do when you notice somebody's in that pain body and is in a really negative state is to avoid them and to not engage. And now you're in a group setting and you're at this board meeting and everyone's contributing, and you got this person that is maybe belittling others or saying negative things or poo-pooing the whole initiative or saying that'll never work. And now there can be a part of you that like wants to just like combat that.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're being counterproductive and this isn't going to work. Well, that's that. So their energy is going to be stronger than your desire for them to stop, because they want the fight. So they actually want the conflict. So like if I was in a board and I'm on a board, and sometimes, I'm in a company too, and sometimes somebody does have a bad mood and they're coming in, and if they live in that perpetual state of bad mood, that's somebody that I'm just going to really limit my associations with. They can grate on my nerves, just like they would grate on anyone's nerves. The best thing we can do, though, is get to a state of compassion, because this
Okay.
is someone that is suffering.
Yeah.
They're being fed on by the pain body. With as awful as we feel in their presence, imagine what it's to be like to be in their mind. Like, this is someone that is in so much pain that they're trying to drag everyone down with them because they feel so awful. So I always think of Jesus, and I love the show The Chosen, because you get a chance to like see this actor, Rumi, like make his impression of Jesus, and he's got these beautiful, kind eyes. Well, if Jesus were in that board meeting and this guy was being super negative, he would just love him. He would
That's
just he
true.
his love would be so strong for this person that was negative. It wouldn't be judgmental. It wouldn't be stop saying what you're saying. It wouldn't be you're being awful or you're being disruptive. It would be, I love you, my son. I love you. I can see that you're in pain. Tell me more about it. What's going on? And I'm not Jesus. I'm not that unconditionally loving. But I use him as my hero, as like,
Yeah.
okay, that WWJD bracelet, what would Jesus do? Well, I've got a bracelet that said HWLF, and it says he would love first, because
Oh,
that's what he would do. He would just love and love and love and give acceptance and give compassion. And you'd be really, really surprised when you stop fighting negativity and saying you should and shouldn't act that way, and we stop trying to control it and get it to be the way we want it to be. When we just love it and accept it and just say, and it's not like, oh, if I said, hey, you're suffering in that meeting, that would be me putting them down. So that's not a nice thing to say. Instead, I'll just use my own example or my own interpretation of how this board meeting could go. Somebody says something and they're like, that's a stupid idea. And what I'm like, oh man, like that's not a kind way to speak to the person that just came up with a great idea. Um, you know, I would probably say, hey, my goal here is for us to have a super constructive meeting. Let's talk to each other in a kind way. It sounds like you've got some really good ideas that can help the mission, and I know you've got a heart to help this mission. What are some of your ideas here? And you know, I know this isn't easy. I'm not in that exact situation, so I can't be there with you. But I do know that when I offer love, like complete love and acceptance for somebody that's having a bad day, it usually dissolves.
that's very cool. That's a very good point. So what were you talking about, the Rumi and Jesus?
Oh, you haven't seen the show The Chosen?
No.
Oh, the TV show is so good.
The
It's so good. I
Chosen.
don't care what religion, what spiritual path you follow. It is one of the best shows ever made. At this point, 200 million people have watched this
Wow.
program, and it's called The Chosen, and it follows it. Basically, a big time Hollywood movie producer decided he was going to make a massively well produced depiction of the life of Jesus. And they picked this actor with like the most beautiful, kind eyes. And he's so like, he's fun. He's like, he just brings a funny personality. He like gives the apostles a hard time. He's just a human being who also is completely loving in all situations. And I grew up Christian, reading the Bible and hearing all the Bible stories, and it was always super boring to me as a kid, And I'm like, and a lot of it, I'm like, man, none of this is applicable to me at all. Like it just, but watching this show, I'm like, oh my gosh, I get it. I
Yeah.
totally get it. It has brought all of the stories to life in a completely different way. So yeah, I recommend watching the show. You'll love it.
Lovely. Thank you. Yes, actually my son just got married a couple of days ago, and it was kind of funny because the pastor, my son calls himself, I don't know if I'm gonna get this right, utilitarian.
Uh-huh.
Just he believes that there is a God. He knows that Jesus existed, but he still questions everything.
Yeah,
And
great.
and it was great. And the pastor was wonderful. He says, I know, that you're not Christian, but he says, we hope that someday, but it's always within yourself what you want. I thought that was very pleasant, and the way that it was told. But he does support his now wife. He always goes to the services with her, and he enjoys learning. And like you said, it doesn't matter what religion you are, you can always learn from
Yeah,
stories
and
like that,
and
right?
and and what a beautiful pastor too.
Yes.
I think, I was driven away from Christianity in my 20s
Hmm.
because of the amount of judgment
Hmm.
of some Christians.
Yep.
It's my way is the right way, and if you don't believe my way, then you're going to hell. And I'm like, that none of that doesn't make sense to me. Like this type of exclusivity to love and truth just doesn't seem like something that God would feel, right? And so
Right.
I completely went away from Christianity because of like that mindset of we're the only ones that are saved and everyone else is damned. And I'm like, well, that's like 2/3 of the planet, like
Yeah.
that. And then
Because
I've come way, 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 way back with a higher understanding, probably where your son is at too. And congratulations on his marriage.
thank you.
That what is God? God is unconditional love. And
Yes.
so that thought pattern, sure, you could take different scriptures in the Bible and say, you can make lots of different analogies about it. But if we really just watch the way Jesus acted, he accepted everybody and he loved everybody. And that's why I love him as a character to emulate so much, because he is the embodiment of unconditional love. It's not judgmental. It's not, if you don't follow me, you suck. It's more
Yeah.
like it's more like, I love you if you choose to follow me or not. And either way, it's great. Because I believe all of us are eternal and all of us have infinite amounts of chances to have God's grace.
I do too. It was actually a really weird thing. I was driving along the other day, and this bird started flying towards the car and then flew out that way. And I said, oh, thank goodness. And then all of a sudden I had this really strange, very strong feeling about being one with the whole universe. That bird, and me driving, and the cars and the people. And it was just like, it was the strangest, awesomest feeling I ever had. I was a part of that bird. I was a part of all the
Oh
people on
my
the road,
gosh.
just
You had
everything.
a glimpse of enlightenment.
It was so amazing. I just sat there. I said, did I just feel that? Like I did. I really
You
did. And it
did.
was just, yeah. So yeah, that just happened.
What a beautiful experience.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
how wonderful for you.
Thank you.
And that's by the grace of God too, right?
Yes.
And that's through lots and lots and lots of self work too, that you were given that kind of grace. But this is how it really works. And I just spent a weekend with Eckhart Tolle, And Eckhart, the whole conference was about the path of enlightenment, and that is the ultimate truth. Think about, from a scientific point of view, the Big Bang theory, right? So before the Big Bang, they say there was nothing. There was maybe like a mustard seed size something. And then it explodes into everything, billions upon billions of stars. Well, in the Bible, it says, in the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was God. And then God said, let there be light. But then later, he then invents the stars, right? He like manifests the stars. Well, if God was the only thing that was there before the Big Bang, what is everything made out of? It's all
Yeah.
made out of God.
Yeah.
All of it. All of it. So that means every single thing, the bird that you saw, the other cars, the other people, you, the planet, the stars, everything is the same exact source. We're all made out of God. And then God just exploded himself into like billions upon billions of different rays of himself. And we are all just one connected force. And this is like, we're talking about enlightenment because that your experience, I just love this topic so much. This is the essence of all happiness. When we feel upset or angry, or what we're feeling is a lie of separation. We're feeling separate from God, and we're feeling separate from everything else and everyone else. And it is really just a lie. Once we see the truth, and this is one of the things I teach in my book, The Good Mood Revolution, is that when we're feeling angry, we're only seeing half of the truth. And if we could see the whole truth, we would feel happy again. We wouldn't be upset by it. So, I'll give you a real life example of anger, right? So, let's go back to that lady that was screaming about things on the beach, right? She was very angry. When we're angry, we're believing three things. One, we're believing somebody got harmed. Two, we're believing somebody did something wrong. And three, we're believing it's all somebody else's fault. All we have to do if we don't want to be angry again, or in this moment to this thought, is to write those three beliefs down and then ask ourselves, could the opposite of these three beliefs also be true? So in that lady's case, she felt somebody had been harmed herself.
Mm-hmm.
Could it also be true that she wasn't harmed?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Maybe the things that maybe she just misplaced her things. There were hundreds of people on the beach. Maybe she just she didn't know they did get somebody else put their stuff down, and maybe she wasn't really harmed and her stuff was still there. And then was it anybody else's fault? Well, maybe it was nobody else's fault. Right? So could it have been nobody else's fault? Could it have just been a misplacing of things? Or maybe her stuff was stolen, but was she really harmed? When we think about how harmed was she, let's say her wallet was stolen and she needed to get new credit cards, and maybe there was $200 in the wallet, and also her car keys were taken, and somebody actually took that stuff. But like in the grand scheme of eternity, was she really harmed, or was that maybe an experience to awaken her? That maybe that was an experience that she needed that was actually going to help her. Perhaps if she had gotten right into her car and driven away and her keys hadn't been stolen, she would have gotten into an accident and died. Perhaps because we don't know the truth of what the future is, and only God does, her stuff being stolen saved her life. What if she wasn't harmed, she was helped? Right? So our brain only can see our limited view when we say, I've been harmed and somebody did something wrong. Somebody, and let's say somebody took her stuff. Let's say somebody took the $200, and she's like, well, you're like, well, that's absolutely wrong. That's definitely wrong. Well, what's the opposite? That isn't wrong. Well, for that person, wherever they're at in their evolution, they're doing the best they can. Right? So maybe stealing the $200 was the best they could do in that situation. Perhaps they really needed it more than that lady needed it. Like, we don't know. Maybe Maybe they were starving. Maybe their kid was sick. Like, we just don't know why they needed that $200 so bad that they stole it. Or maybe they needed to steal it and then have negative consequences and have a lesson that they could only learn that way. Right. So this is seeing the world from, once we stop our limited view of, I know that they're wrong and they shouldn't have done this and I've been harmed, and we start to see the opposites of it, then we start to be able to release the anger, because this is that we're all one, right? If you can look at the exact opposite of what you think and see how it's also true, you now are like seeing the world like God sees the world, and there's no anger in that way.
That's very cool. That's actually very interesting. I I have a silly story. My nephew passed away 16 years ago, actually, this past Sunday, Father's Day.
Mm.
He had cancer, 23. So when he passed away, I had an auto repair shop at the time, and I had this big board. And the last time I saw him, I brought him a pink monkey, a blown up pink monkey. But I still had 12 of them. So I blew them all up and I put them all on the thing, and I said, "Rest in peace, Ross." And then the date. And the next day, a whole bunch of them were stolen. So I actually did write to the Toronto Sun here in Toronto, and they published it. And I said, "I'm just hoping that whoever stole them, they really, really needed it." And it was like, because I was thinking somebody probably stole them for their kids, right? Because they thought, oh, cute
Yeah.
pink monkey. But I looked at it that way, though, which was interesting. So it didn't upset me.
Wow.
Instead, I looked at it, I hope whoever took it, Ross is probably laughing up in heaven, going, "Look at that, Aunt Lorianne, your monkeys are popular," right? Like, they go. And the fact that it was published in one of the top newspapers in Toronto, I thought was hilarious. I still have the clipping of it. I
Oh,
never thought they would publish it. I
what
took
a
a picture.
what
Yeah,
a what a high point of view. Like, that's this is, this is the key to happiness, is that happiness is a choice of perspective.
it is.
And you
Yeah,
chose a really beautiful perspective, but at any moment we could choose a really limited perspective. And when we do, we can get totally lost in that anger and that this isn't right, and argue with reality and create all this suffering for us. It's totally okay. I do that too. I get lost in suffering and I get angry and I'll blow up sometimes, and I'll see things from an unenlightened point of view. But anytime you do, it's a great opportunity to sit down with a pen and paper and say, what am I
yeah.
believing right now?
I
What
love that.
what thought is going through my mind that would make me feel so separate and so disconnected from everybody? And then what's the opposite of that? As soon as we take the thought and say, what's the opposite of it? And look at the opposite and see how the opposite is true, the thought loses all of its power.
I love it. Actually, that sort of made me think about how that could connect with bulimia too, because it's a good idea that even whether it's before or after, um, having those overeating sessions, is to sit down with a pen and exactly that. Why did I, what was, if you can sense it or try to sense it and to write it down, and then find an opposite
Yeah,
for the next
absolutely.
time, right? For the next time, like, or if it's before you started, to start your binging, that may stop it there, right? Why am I wanting this right now? What is going through my
Mm.
head? And then now do the opposite. I'm just putting it as that's something I wish I had had, because it might have actually discouraged my continuing with going towards binging.
And then the guilt that comes afterwards. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a negative thought too. I shouldn't have
Yeah.
done that and I'm bad. We would want to question those guilty thoughts too.
Yeah.
And I'd turn them around and I'd say, I should have done that.
Yeah.
Why should I have done that? Because I did. Right.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna argue with the reality that I did. And then I'm wrong for doing that, or I'm bad for doing that. What's the opposite? Oh, I'm not wrong. I'm really
Mhm.
beautiful. I'm fully loved. And once we can like really get down, the root of it is, I'm wrong, I'm bad, there's something messed up with me, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable. That's the root of all of this self-destructive behavior. And once we get the opposite of the root out, which that whole thing is a lie. I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy. All of that's a lie. The truth is you're completely loved, you're completely accepted, you're completely whole and complete and wonderful and perfect and stainless, and everything you do is already forgiven. That's the truth. And once we start to reaffirm that truth to ourselves over and over and over and over, that desire to harm ourselves or sabotage ourselves starts to reduce. And I'm not saying this is overnight. I didn't stop doing drugs overnight. I didn't stop drinking alcohol overnight. It took years and years and years, like probably a decade. But it's the path to healing. It's the start.
I love it. So before we go, I really would like you to speak to, I know that you are a podcast host. You mentioned your book, The Good Mood Revelation. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and where people can find you, please, Matt.
Absolutely. And I just want to say thank you. This has been such a pleasure and such an honor. You were out there, you were a warrior for the light, like
Thank
doing
you.
beautiful work out there. The best place to plug in with me is the podcast, and it's called Good Mood Revolution, and it's on all podcast platforms. And the book, it took 3 years to write this book. I wrote it and rewrote it and then learned more and then said, oh man, I got to have this in the book, and then rewrote more. And it's a really beautiful book, and it's on pre-order on Amazon, called Good Mood Revolution as well.
Revolution. Okay, beautiful. On Amazon. That is great. I so appreciate you being here today. I think positivity is really important. It always has been, and it always will be. But there are some days it's needed more than others. So it's good to have people like you there that's helping people to just, if you're feeling negative, just I hope this helps. I hope this helps listeners. I'm pretty sure it will.
Can I make just one more as you were wrapping up?
Sure.
I do want to say one more thing about feeling not positive. Sometimes life feels a little bit beyond hope, and I've been there. And if you're ever feeling hopeless, that's not an emotion we can get out of on our own. We need the help of others in that moment. So if you think I should just be positive and I just can't be, and it's kind of beyond hope, and maybe I'm just broken and there's something wrong, and it's other people can do it, but I can't. That's not true, but you do need to ask for help. And that can be a professional, it can be a psychologist, a psychiatrist, it can just be a group of really good friends that are positive and high vibration energy. But what you really need is somebody else's loving energy to love you and accept you and pull you out of that depths of despair that we can find ourselves in sometimes when we get too lost in the lies of the mind. And then sometimes, this happens to me, we're not hopeless, we're just tired. So
That's true.
Sometimes I'm just tired, and it's the end of the day and I'm cranky, and guess what? I need to rest. And so that's the self-grace and self-compassion, is that sometimes we're not really negative, we're just sleepy or tired and cranky. And once we have a good night rest and a cup of coffee the next morning, we're back to our positive self. And there's nothing wrong with that either.
I really appreciate that message, and you're right. It's a good point to make. Thank you very much. Well, again, Matt, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you.
I appreciate you.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit me at bleepbulimia.com.